Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devon Decker, and joining me, my host companion, who's laughing for all of the right reasons, Sejohn Sarowick. Sejohn.
You know, can I look? We've been podcasting for a few years, and so I won't say that we are experts, but we are definitely well versed in the matter. Let me give a helpful tip to anybody at home that wants to ever start podcasting. Don't lead into your program 2 seconds before you start recording by turning to your recording partner of 7 years and going, "I hate everything." Click. Hey, everybody.
That's what I wanted to. I wanted to capture the moment, and I did. Your laughter, everything, it captured the moment because we have
a child's laughter captured for eternity.
Oh yes. This is our 318th episode of the Say Report, let alone everything that you and I were involved in before we came together to form this show.
And things since we formed this show.
Yeah, right? And also Adam Sandler Cinematic Universe stuff and very special episodes. I think there's 370 things under just the Say Report banner, and then you add the 28 episodes of the Adam Sandler Cinematic Universe. So, oh my God, that's 398 things.
Yeah, it's almost 400 episodes. And if you assume that we average about 2 hours, especially because freaking Justice League will always throw that number off going forward. But then that is 800 hours of content that we have recorded just in this house here.
So here's the reason. Here's the reason why I can say before we record the episode, I hate everything, and then I'm just ready to roll. And I'm like, whatever his reaction is to that, I'll let it be recorded.
Because I'm a goddamn professional.
We've 800 hours of content as you and I together. And why the fuck today did this stuff decide, I'm not going to work? Fuck you. Fuck you. Just fuck you.
I mean, I feel like podcasting and bitching about Skype / Discord / audio Audacity, this has been around since the beginning. I don't know, man.
We're not using Audacity. We're not in college anymore.
No, I know, but there was a time. But it's really interesting, actually, that you do point out that for as big as this industry is, right? And it is an industry. There is money involved, and even at the most amateur of levels, people are spending hundreds of dollars to get off their feet to do something like this. And that's a whole conversation unto itself about privilege and all of that shit. But divorced even from that, I cannot believe that in the 15 years that podcasting has existed, that there has not been some specialized software that has come along to allow people to do this kind of thing that is a little bit more dependable, right? Skype was around before that, and Skype has always been kind of meh, especially after Microsoft bought it, right? And that's always kind of been in and out. And then Discord, while we've depended on Discord to do this because everybody nowadays seems to depend on Discord, I honestly think it's the new thing after Slack, is that it's not built for that, right? And so in terms of to get into the nitty gritties of shit, the ways in which voices overlap sometimes get weird and things, right? And people get muted unexpectedly, but it's because Discord is not trying to create an even flow of conversation to be recorded and listened back to. It's just not what it's meant for. You can do it, but whatever, right? The idea that there is not a specific software, even at the highest levels that I know of, at least, that no, this is what the professionals use. This is podcasting focused, and this is these are the ways in which it benefits specifically podcasters. That the fact that just hasn't happened in a decade and a half is actually kind of fascinating, considering the way that the tech market works.
I mean, it's the Wild West, right? I remember when I started podcasting with real consistency is, I guess, the word I'm going to use. And the reason why is I was out drinking with a friend, and he said,
with real vigor.
No, because I had tried and failed to do pilots Beer in a Movie and the 5 Days 5 movie series that Dale and I would do, where we would go see a movie, talk about it, and then go see another movie and try to see 5 in a row. And that really affects how you feel about the movies that you see. Let me tell you
surprise,
that.
Surprise.
It's additive.
By about hour 10, you kind of start seeing movies that you're not really watching.
No, it was 5 days. It was over 5 days.
Oh!
So it was
you made it sound like it was like a fucking marathon run.
No.
which honestly sounds like something you and I would do for an
Oh,
episode.
I love this. This is a 500 episode special, right? We'll
I'm
watch
kind of going
5
through that right
movies.
now with some of the Mission Impossibles, but we'll get to that. I actually found myself watching 3 in a row one day by accident.
Well, if as long as it wasn't 2, 3, 4, I think
Oops.
you'd be okay.
Oops.
Oh no! When you said that, what you said, I'm like, it had to have been to 2, 3, 4, because let me tell you, that right there is cultural whiplash at its finest. I don't think I've ever watched 2 a second time. I got to be completely honest with you.
I have to say, I've got some positive feelings about 2 that I did not have before rewatching it with this current. It's not really a project. Me and a friend have started watching them, and like I said, I do want to get into this, but I don't want to get away from the podcasting conversation because I am fascinated. I just by the fact that, like you said, our shit just crapped down on us.
Crap down.
It's like, hey, 7 years.
Sat down at 10:50, like gonna be prepared. Didn't start recording until 11:35. And everything else worked. Like, for the first time in a long time, I didn't get the thing from, we use GarageBand, right? Because whatever. And even that, like, that's like the next step up from Audacity.
Right, exactly.
So
no, again, yeah, we're not a specialized software specifically for this, but definitely something geared towards recording voices. So what the hell, right?
But almost every time since the beginning, when I've gone to open GarageBand, I've gotten, you can't do this, as it's opening in the background. So I don't know, but I didn't get that today. So I guess it was Discord's turn to crap out. But yeah, I remember I went out drinking with a friend that I worked at Hollywood Video with, and he's like, man, I started podcasting. And I'm like, I'd like to do it, but I just need like a dedicated server, and I don't want to set up my own. He let me know about Podomatic, because we use Podomatic as our way to filter through to all the other podcasting services. And he's like, and dude, I love it because it's the Wild West. And that was at least 10 years ago that I had that discussion.
Yeah.
And things have not changed at all in those 10 years.
Things have really not. No. Yeah, I like it's the idea that, like, yes, we've gotten upgraded versions of these things. Yes, people have started to consider podcasting when they create and sell microphones and things like that. Like that definitely is there, right? It's all there. It's that one little piece of the pie, the boutique tech, that is just not present for podcasting. And again, this is to my knowledge, and we have been doing this for a long time, and we do research this stuff. So I would assume we'd at least stumble on, even if it was like a $3,000 program, and we're like, yeah, we don't need that.
I come across programs all the time, because you're not wrong. I'm researching, and I see this stuff, and then I look at it, and I'm like, I don't want to use you. I don't want to pay because what I have right now works, right?
Right.
Discounting what happened this morning, and we've had other like semi-failures like that. I'm not saying that it's always perfect every time.
And, I was only kind of half joking when I mentioned that, like, these kinds of complaints, like, oh shit, like Skype is pooped out today on us, like is like basically every podcast has a dedicated let's complain about our setup episode, right? Like it's like a bottle episode for everyone out there. Like, this is not an uncommon conversation at all.
Yeah. So I don't understand. And look at some of those programs, because I've been collecting them, but every time I'm like, how does that work though? Like, that doesn't seem like it would work. Yeah. Like, you're promising me a lot, but it doesn't seem worth it.
It's just, think about like if you think about the ways in which picture sharing, right? Just the boutique tech of picture sharing, which was like Snapchat, and now and then Instagram. Now TikTok really is kind of taking over everything in that regard. But like you can point to specific programs that bubbled up at the moment that, like, even if you didn't use them, you recognize this is the way that people are communicating with each other, right? I just can't put my finger on one thing that everybody out there is just like, this is the podcasting focused thing. And it's wild to me, because like every other person has a podcast.
The craziest thing about it, if we're being completely honest, is the place where most people consume podcasts still is Apple Podcasts. Even with all the rebranding that they've done, the most like popular place for people to find and consume podcasts is through Apple Podcasts.
Well, part of the reason for that is because all of the feeds out there that have gotten built over the last decade pull from Apple. Like the podcasting app that I use on my phone, it has 3 options on where it can pull podcasts from. And I can look in other places, but why would I? Because everything's on Apple, like you said. So my podcasting app on my Android phone technically goes to Apple to find the podcast to download for me.
Exactly. No, then that makes sense, right?
And if every other little piece of software out there is doing the same thing, it's like there's no incentive for it to never not be. Yeah,
you have to be on Apple Podcasts to make it, right?
Right.
As much fun as like we joke about, oh, we're on Amazon and being on Spotify is nice, and Spotify had like we're gonna try to topple that, and then they got into bed with Joe Rogan, and your mileage may vary on how things went there. I know how I feel about it. I'm pretty sure I know how you feel about it. And I think our opinions are the majority opinion with the rest of the world. But again, I don't want to say anything there.
How did we record an entire episode the other day about The Longest Yard and not even get close to talking about what's his nuts there that records with Joe Rogan like all the time?
I don't know who that is.
The guy that plays the heavyweight Italian guy in the movie.
Oh, Joey Coco Diaz?
Yeah. You like that? You know that he is like
can't and I'll be fine.
He's basically like the fucking like Baba Booey guy from Howard Stern for Joe Rogan.
I don't know. I hear Joey Coco Diaz on a bunch of podcasts and stuff. He doesn't even recognize for me. And you know how I talk about The Longest Yard and don't touch on him at all is the fact that he's not a character.
No, he's not.
A prop. I don't know. I just think that's it. Like, not to go back to the Adam Sandler stuff, but my point is, Apple is the biggest place where people are finding and consuming podcasts, even if other like aggregates are just pulling their RSS feeds from there.
Yeah,
it's weird then that Apple hasn't developed something specifically for podcasting. Like I haven't used the new GarageBand since we had to record an episode of Two Friends on a Couch using the guest's laptop once. Because we went to her house and she's like, we can just use my laptop. And I'm like, okay, that'll be fine. And I'm like, oh, GarageBand looks very different now. It does not look like, because the GarageBand I use, circa 2013, my God, I've had this Mac for 10 years. That's another discussion for another time though. Like it looks like Logic. And I was using Logic at some of my sound like jobs and things there. And I'm okay with that. But then when they decided that like Logic is going to be an expensive program along the lines of Final Cut and Final Cut Pro, like they made GarageBand, they kind of made it poppier is the way that I would describe it.
They appled it up is what you're saying. Yeah.
So that it would be appealing to kids and then they can graduate to Logic eventually. Yeah. And using that, I'm just like, oh no, one of the main reasons why I'm still locked to this 4 gigabytes of RAM, 250 gig hard drive Mac Mini.
Dev, I wonder why sometimes our programs aren't working.
Yeah. Well, with the new Mac Mini with the M2 chip, I'm probably going to upgrade. I just don't know when, right? Yeah. And now this episode has opened some eyes for me. We're going to have some fun stuff coming down the line. Don't worry, ladies and gentlemen. Anywho, it just... They could do like a podcast discussion in GarageBand because you have like vocals solo, you have instruments solo, or you have like dual. Like you have those options. It's crazy to me that there isn't a podcast option. Now again, there very well might be on a 2023 version of GarageBand.
Sure.
But I'm just not aware of it. And if it's there, nobody's talking about it because that's the other problem, right? You get set in your ways when you're a podcaster. Nobody wants to like kind of trip the light fantastic.
That's true of any hobby, right? Like hobbyists go kind of hand in hand with conservative like ideals in a lot of ways, in the nature of just like no, you want to do this the way that it was quote unquote traditionally done, right? Or things like that, right? Like there's very few hobbyists out there that are out there trying to like break the mold on what they're doing, and those that are the most interesting ones to me, at least, right? Like you watch some, they end up with like YouTube channels and personalities and stuff like that, but that is, like I said, that I think that idea that like you get stuck in like how things are currently done or the way that you were taught how it was done and you don't want to do it differently, and the beauty of something like podcasting for the majority of people is it's not a job. So why would you? You're going to do it the way that you want to do it in your downtime to enjoy yourself. Why you're not going to challenge yourself any more than you want to on your own, right? There's no incentive. I mean.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I've been wanting to do some things, and it's just like, but the other bills that I have, like that's an idea for later on down the line.
Yeah,
But
yeah, and
it's
like you're probably like 100%. It's not that there's not programs available that consider podcasting and have the option available that everybody probably uses. GarageBand's a great example of that, right? I'm sure that a lot of people would swear by GarageBand for their podcasting needs. My point is like, even if it's not a good one, like I don't even expect it to be top of the line. I just can't believe that some tech bro out there has not just been like, everybody's podcasting. Let's try and sell them a podcasting software. Like.
I mean, they're out there, and if you want to, I mean, that could be a fun thing for March, is to try using some of the podcasting softwares out there. Like, this is a production meeting that we're having right now too. This is fun. This is going to be every episode of podcast you've ever heard in one episode.
What I want to know is I want to know what podcasting softwares anyone out there knows off the top of their head. I don't want people to do research. It's that, like, that's what I mean. Is I want to get on YouTube, and the first video recommended to me is like, hey, here's like Podumpatrucks or whatever, like that kind of shit.
Podumpatrucks.
Like there's no. With the number of people out there that are constantly doing what we do today, the idea that there is not more conversation about like here is something that you can grab today to get started to do this. Like, hey, like this kind of this idea that like people still have to discover like the act of podcasting on their own is weird, considering how many people do it. Like, it's just we act like it's a niche hobby, knowing full well that there is just everybody out there has done this at least once.
Yeah, I mean, it's so strange, because I remember when it was niche. Excuse me, I remember when Bare Naked Ladies did their like podcast. It's not Ships and Dip, that was their cruise that they did, that was part of it, but it was like, it was just Ed Robertson talking into a microphone for like an hour, and he would just talk for an hour, and I'm like, this is cool, it'd be cool to do this. But that was like 2006, 2007.
Yeah,
God of War 2 was coming out. Like, that's the thing, because the only reason I played God of War was because Ed Robertson's like, I played this game, God of War, and like, it's really good. So I'm like, I'll give that a try. It was $20 at Walmart, so I rented it, had a blast, and then gave them far too much money. I'm so proud of myself for not owning God of War Ragnarok, considering I never finished the fourth one, because it was such a departure from the first three games.
I mean, yeah, it was almost like it was a completely different series.
Yeah.
I remember like the earliest podcasts for me were always actually television shows that then they would post up like Real Time with Bill Maher, like does that, and John Oliver I think does that, the same with his stuff too now. But like that whole like trick of this, we're not even really recording this for the audio medium, but you can get the audio if you want it. Like, I was like, yes, I do.
I also remember Strong Bad Emails had a podcast.
Well, they had a vodcast.
Well, they had a vodcast, but it was the emails just put so that you could watch them on your iPod. Mm-hmm. Which, like, it's so weird to me that iPods are deprecated tech.
That's where I watched them. Is like I didn't watch Homestar Runner on computers after high school. Like at that point, they had all come out as different subscriptions you could get on board with, and I would get them sent to me.
That's so crazy. I just remember from that he would break your screen. They do that big screen break thing at the start of every one. Good times, great oldies. And you know what? Getting stuck in your hobby, and that reminds me of really the first sound engineering course that I took. Now, you know Peter, right? You and I met because of Peter, essentially. Like, that's the nicest thing that I can say.
Yeah, let's get the most generic name for a human that nobody else listening to us has ever heard of. This is narrowcasting on the best level.
Well, I didn't give his last name.
No, I don't want you to.
Oh, good. I'm glad. But yeah, so Sejohn and I, Sejohn's a year younger than me. We went to the University of Rhode Island together, and we were both scheduled to work on Romeo and Juliet. And here's the thing about Romeo and Juliet. I guess here's the thing about theater. I don't know if people are aware of this. There's a lot that goes on backstage with people all clad in black to make a show happen. But the unfortunate thing is, with a Shakespeare piece, you need a lot less people clad in black to make that happen. Would you agree or disagree with that statement, Sejohn?
I mean, there are ways to put up small shows of all kinds, and
Right.
when you're in university, it's a balancing act between we want to teach people how to do theater, but we also don't necessarily need to be paying, you know, 20.
Paying.
We don't need to. Well, no. I mean, for like sets and props and shit.
Yeah.
And if you're not paying for that shit, you don't need students to move them around, right? Like, it's a weird thing that you have to figure out, because on the one hand, you want big ensemble shows, and Shakespeare's great for that. So you can get Shakespeare at the university level that is overdone, overproduced, one might say, but it's purposely done so because it's an educational, experience for everybody involved. But also, you do inevitably hit that point where it's like, we don't have enough money, we need to put something on stage. Shakespeare, because Shakespeare can also just be done with 2 boxes and a funny hat. So, but yes, Shakespeare tends to be one of those ones that colleges, especially you or I, would use to be the like, so let's slot this in, put one thing on stage, and then nobody has to do anything for the rest of the show, because you just need those sometimes.
All right, not to derail what we're talking here. Real Talk Friday on a Sunday to be released on a Monday. How many people do you think need to be on stage when Mercutio and Tybalt sword fight?
Probably only. I would probably say only 8 people minimum. You could go more, but there needs to be their gangs meeting,
Yeah.
and then they fight. So as long as you can give the illusion that there's a gang of people on each of their side, then you're fine. So I mean, like, I guess need to be on stage 2 people. Honestly, 1. I've seen Mr. Bean.
I would say like 3. I think you need Mercutio, Tybalt, and Romeo to then jump in and fight Tybalt when Mercutio dies. I think that that would
Well, there are
convey
lines from
the
Mercutio
meaning.
to like the group and stuff, though, and I think there might be a couple of clapbacks from those guys.
Yeah.
So I do think there are a few lines that justify at least another person being
I just feel like that Shakespeare piece that we were part of, that where like our friendship was forged, there were a lot of people on stage for that scene that it was unnecessary.
Again, man, I don't know what to tell you. When you're working in educational theater,
You gotta do what you gotta do.
need to
That's
figure out
true.
how to
It's
fit
true.
20 people on stage.
I just feel like you don't need 20 people on stage for that. I feel like it takes away from what's happening. I don't know. I've done Romeo and Juliet too many times. Is the truest true of that? But
yeah, but also they are supposed to get into a huge fight on the streets of Vienna. That like this is it's
Verona, not
just-
Vienna.
or whatever.
There are
But
no
they're
streets in
they're
Vienna.
not like a chamber, but they're not like in a chamber room somewhere, like arguing with each
That's
other.
true.
Like
They
they
are
are supposed to be
outdoors.
out there with their roving gangs fighting for the street. I mean, like, I honestly, the more people you get, the more sense it makes.
I don't. Yeah, all right. So good point. I don't know. It always just felt busy to me. That's the thing. But anywho, so one of the things you have to take at URI. This is fun, right? This is narrow. He's not wrong about the narrow casting here. One of the courses you have to take is stagecraft. Is that the name of the course? I feel like it was stagecraft.
It's a name for the course. Yeah, it works. Yeah, stagecraft works.
Stagecraft. I don't know. It was like a theater 181 is the number, because I have course numbers just running through my head all the time now. And one of the requirements in that course was to work stage crew on one of the main stage shows. Now, for me, as a freshman, that was Beauty and the Beast. So there was more to do than they actually had students to work on that show. Mm-hmm. To the fact that for Grapes of Wrath, the one that they did as like the first show in the fall, they only like allowed 4 people to sign up for that, knowing full well we don't have stuff for everybody to do. Like, we need those people and those bodies for Beauty and the Beast, where we're moving thousands of set pieces like per minute. That was a ridiculous.
But the period piece straight play often gets the shaft in that regard when it comes to that sort of stuff, because it's like, we could just do the smaller version of this because we need everybody for the big musical version of that. And
you say that, but we had a truck on stage that was a full truck that was broken down and built,
and only 4 people to move it around. So that was a bad idea.
Yeah. But hey, that's the university setting, right? It's not going to be anything. And then after Beauty and the Beast, I'm just telling you stories. I don't know why. And it's because of what you said about.
To be fair, I don't either. So
excellent. And then for Dangerous Liaisons, which was the 3rd show, they decided to do Cruise, like, and not everybody has to be there every night. And that was like the smartest thing ever. And then people didn't like that because it's like, well, they're not having to do as much work as other people. And it's like, yeah, but like that is a more real world setting that like you're going to have to work these nights, but you'll also be expected there all this time to learn. I don't know. It felt like better teaching to me. And who am I? I'm a guy who was ostracized by this department at the end of the day. Anywho, when Sejohn is there to do stage work for Romeo and Juliet, and there's not a lot of stage work to do, like just being completely honest, we built basically a McDonald's play place on the stage, and all they needed the stage crew for was to clean up and set up and clean up that set every night. So I asked,
there was more going on with helping people in and out of costumes than anything else backstage for that one.
Yeah, and that's not even stagecraft. That's part of costume
and the stagecraft.
course.
Yeah, exactly. They had a whole other course to take care of that shit. Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's the other thing, is they also cannibalized a lot of the jobs that people could trade off on doing by sectioning them off into only this group because this group is learning this. And it's like, yeah, eventually this other person's going to have to know it too. So maybe help each other out. No, impossible.
Yeah, weird. But when it came down to the fact that like there wasn't going to be a lot to do backstage, but I thought, I'd like to grow the sound design section of this university that I'm attending. I asked if we could have Sejohn come up to learn the sound design stuff, right? Running a soundboard, designing a show. And we got approval right away. And the guy who was doing it, Peter, he was so mad at me, Sejohn, because he was excited for us to work hand in hand. And I'm just like, yeah, we can still do that, Peter. We're teaching a third party. And like, that's how things grow, right?
Devon, I have to confess to you, the reason he was pissed is because, having known this man now, he wanted to not have to do any work. And he thought he could do that because Devon would probably just do what Devon does. But then you brought in a person that he then had to teach. He then was responsible for making sure that my timesheets were signed and all of that sort of shit. You put him in a position where he could not fuck off. That is why he was pissed.
Oh, well, that makes sense. That tracks.
He wanted to go get high behind fucking dumpster while you did the show, and I was there, so he couldn't do that.
He totally could. How many people have I taught in my life at that point? I guess he doesn't know.
Yeah, but he doesn't know who I am at that point. You have now just introduced a freshman student to him that he now is responsible for. That's all he sees.
I guess that's true. But yeah, so this guy that we're describing how we are, he taught a class my freshman year on sound design. And this is how it all ties together. I promise it kind of makes sense. And how like when you take a college course, I don't know if the listeners are people who attend college, but you're given the book that you need to buy for the class. In a design course, you might be given a piece of software that you need to purchase for the class. Do you want to take a stab in the dark, Sejohn, at the software we were told was required to be purchased for this course?
Was it something like Final Cut?
It was Cubase.
Oh, Cubase. Oh, man.
Cubase Pro, which in 2005 was all but deprecated.
Yeah.
Was the required purchase for this course. I'm going to teach you how to do things in Cubase. To which I'm like, well, I'm not buying Cubase. It's a $100 program.
Yeah, and it's a program that was $100, and the reason that it had been deprecated is that basically any board or device or software, like hardware, would come with its own kind of internal software that could just do what Cubase already did. Like by this point, not when Cubase first came out, necessity, because they needed something to tie it together. By the time I got there and learned it, I was like, you could just like buy a board that just does all this shit for you, right?
Well, Cubase is not the Q software that you're thinking of. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know where we are there. Cubase is a
creation and like mixing.
Yeah, it's like GarageBand or Audacity.
Right.
And it was the industry standard, so far down to the point that there's a Cubase Atari game. It might be NES. It's one of those. I think it's Atari though, where it's like $600 because it comes with the cartridge to interface with your Atari console.
But to be clear, make sure you're being clear about this. When you say that, that means that this was 1989 when that came
yeah,
out?
it was in the 80s.
Yeah.
It was Atari 2600. It wasn't 5200 or 78,000.
Right.
Like it was Atari 2600 with the wood paneling. So that means it has to be prior to 1985, right? Because that's when they crash into the ground. And will video games ever survive this? And so it was like a $600 program that was the cartridge, and then it came with a specialized controller so that you could use your Atari as a recording studio.
Yeah.
And I did not know about this until like years later, but then it like occurred to me that like the reason this guy is saying you have to learn on Cubase is because that's what the industry standard was for him for so long.
For 20 years ago when he was working in the industry. Yeah.
Like, he's like, if you go to Guitar Center, I'm sure they'll have it.
Right, but the very basic sound mixing and software that stuff was, right? By the time we were in school, like, we were getting that shit just, like, pre-installed on our laptops when we were buying. Oh. We were getting better stuff than that, I mean.
I was working at a radio station where the bulk of that production work was done on either Audacity, which is a free... what is it called when it's like crowdsourced, which is a free crowdsourced production program. One of the production labs had that, and the other one had Pro Tools free on it.
Nice.
Which, like, yeah, Pro Tools free is what he should have told us all to download, because Pro Tools, like the actual Pro Tools, was the industry standard at the time.
Yeah.
And like he even used it. By the time we were working on Romeo and Juliet, he's like, yeah, we have Pro Tools. You need to make sure this USB key is plugged in or the program won't open. And that blew his mind.
Yeah, I remember that we had the little dongle.
Yeah, it was a little purple USB. It was crazy. Just insanity. Like when you think about what protection things were back then.
They still use stuff like that now. When I worked at Netflix not 2 years ago, I guess it would have been 3 or 4 years ago at this point. But you needed to plug one of those fuckers in, and it had a thumbprint reader on it.
Oh, jeez.
So like you had to plug it in for the program for the website to even like unlock for you, and then it asked you to then place your thumb on it so that it could read your fingerprint to make sure you were the one responsible for that one. So that way people couldn't trade keys or leave their keys somewhere and someone could get into their shit.
All I think about is the Authy ones, the ones that like are connected to the internet and they give you the 6 numbers.
Yeah.
And they update every like minute.
Yeah, I use that for a couple of things too. Now.
Like that, I thought that was more the standard. That sounds crazy. I've never had to come up against that, but it makes sense what you just described.
Yeah, although as I pointed out, I guess it was about 4 years ago, so maybe by this point they're not doing that shit anymore. But like it was as recent as that, at least.
Yeah, it's just insane. But like that's the thing. And he says Cubase, and then I'm like, I met with all the students after class, and I'm like, don't go buy Cubase. Don't waste your money on that. Go download Audacity. Anything he tells us to do in Cubase, you'll be able to do in Audacity, and it'll be a lot cleaner because Cubase is old software. And I remember going to Guitar Center and asking them about it, and they're like, no, why would we carry that? And I'm like, it's what our professor told us you guys would do. And they're like, hold on. And they checked in the system, and they're like, yeah, one store in New Hampshire. I don't know why I said it like that. New Hampshire. In New Hampshire.
It's with a New Hampshire accent, right? That's how they all talk.
Yeah. Has a copy of it on shelf right now.
Welcome to New Hampshire.
And I'm like, well, I'm not going to New Hampshire. They're like, we can ship it in. I'm like, one store in the entire pantheon of Guitar Center has this program. No, I'm not.
Well, and for all you know, what they were actually going to ship you was going to be some big ass drum machine that used Cubase, right?
All right, that'll be $3,800.
You said there was a whole bunch of you that needed it, right? Just pull your money together.
Oh God!
And you guys could have made a synth band. I think you missed a real opportunity.
I did not miss a real opportunity. Let me tell you right here. And here's the reason all this is coming up is I recently found my final for that class, which I got an A on, and then I remembered that I did like 7 people's finals in that class. I hope the statute of limitations is up on that because I think they could take my degree away for that.
Class with you. I know who was in that class with you, and because I like who was around your freshman year, and I have a sneaking suspicion I know whose finals you did. Also, would have made a great synth band. I'm not getting off of this.
I would have probably made a great synth band. Okay, if I don't understand how to be a synth band. Let's be honest about it.
Oh man. No,
Soundboards
you listen to
scare
yacht
me.
rock. Yeah,
Yeah.
you weren't big into the 80s synth pop stuff.
Oh,
That's going on.
dude. I mean, I like new wave. I like specifically the new wave album from Grand Theft Auto Vice City.
Nice.
Like
Very good.
that's about it. If
Hey man,
anything not involved in there, it's too harsh for me.
it's too harsh. Oh shit.
It's not mellow, man. Like yacht rock is mellow. I don't know. It was but it was crazy. But then it's just, but it talks. It just supports what you talk about, where when you do something, you get stuck in the way that you've done it forever. I mean,
Yeah.
that's basically what our entire university technical education was. The way that the lighting designer did stuff was so archaic. And like,
Yeah, no, I mean, look, academia in general. Look, I am the first person to always rail against like extended education and all this shit because I was we were both raised in a generation in which we were told college is the next step, right? And we've talked about this before about what bullshit that truly was, because it's really set a lot of people up down a bad path. They got an education that they currently are no longer using for whatever reason, and they've got $100,000 in debt to go along with it, right? Some people in this very conversation included in that, right? So there's this idea that I I have this real issue personally with the way that academia works. And the truth is at the root of it, right? This is what you're talking about, is college education, academia in general is so dependent on this method of old person learned it how to do a thing, trains the young person, right? That's just kind of how it has to be. The problem is that we have over the last decade, this is not so much, but before that, we had started putting so much power in the hands of like the teacher in that scenario that we kind of stopped innovating in a lot of ways, and it stunted the ways in which we got creative with this kind of shit. And it really is. It's why now more and more teachers are being taught to say, like, this is the way we do it now. Here's ways they did it in the past. Maybe you can figure out a way to do it in the future, as opposed to just saying, no, this is the way it's done. Unfortunately, you still have those types of professors. You still have those types of teachers out there that
they're
are always going to tell you. Well, no, because that's the problem. Is tenure's been on the decline for 10 years now. Like they don't give tenure to people anymore. It's not one of the reasons that many people are not going into extended to like later education positions anymore is because a lot of positions have just become like, we're going to hire you on for the year and maybe we'll get you into a tenure track position eventually. And then 5 years later, you realize that they've been promising a possible tenure track job and they're just not opening those up anymore. And like a lot of people are now starting to scratch their heads because they've been like sitting in these like adjunct positions working at colleges being promised eventually the tenure track line would be hired on, and it just hasn't. And they're just like, wait a minute, you've gotten 5 years of work out of me but without any of that counting towards a tenured position. And it's because a lot of people that had tenure abused the shit out of it in the 90s and the 2000s and really fucking ruined the system for a lot of people. But yeah, it's all because you have these people that have grown up being taught this is the way that things are done. And it's only been in the last 10 years or so that we've really started to re-examine the ways in which we teach like these concepts or hand down this shit, because like you're saying, it really has started to stunt innovation, creativity, and progress in fields that are really important now. Theater was kind of one of the earliest ones to kind of deal with it, but not important enough for anybody to ever change what they're doing. I doubt if you walked into some theater program now that it'd be too much different. Like they're still going to tell you, no, you have to do iambic pentameter if you do Shakespeare. You have to learn that, which is it's a hard, fast rule, and one has to wonder if it's really worth it, considering that like we don't even really know if iambic pentameter was like officially followed. Like it wasn't a law when Shakespeare was writing. So like there's a lot of arguments to be made about like, yeah, it wouldn't be said that way though, because it would flow better if you said it this way. Like it hits the ear better. And they would have cared about that more than they ever would have cared about following Shakespeare's like flow pattern on the page. But like that is a perfect example of like this really conservative idea that has just been handed down for generations and is just never going to be questioned. It's just not going to be questioned. And like That's going to probably continue to happen because theater is not important enough for people to really like enact like major cultural change in that regard. Whereas, in like STEM like fields, there's been a lot of push for people to be like, we've really stopped producing a lot of really important shit that is going to like keep us alive. We might want to start considering letting people be a little bit more open-minded here or there in this regard, and I point to things like more women in STEM and more people of otherness in STEM as like big examples. There's been huge pushes for that for 20 years now, right?
Yeah. I don't know. I guess the hardest part about the theater thing for me is I got in there right as there was starting to be an understanding that designing the sound and music of a production was a viable and necessary part of the show. Like it felt like it was new to them. Like as much as we joke about Peter and everything that he did, he was kind of the first person that ever taught a sound design course at that university.
Sure.
And before, it would just be like, oh, we'll bring in a sound designer and they'll run the board. It wasn't like, Devon will come in and do this job for me, right?
Yeah.
So there was like that weird bit of innovation there, which clearly I attached to, right? Because going forward, the biggest part I use of my technical theater theatrical design degree.
You got to be careful though, because while it felt like innovation to us because it was something that was new to
URI, yeah.
like I would even point to the advent of the whole film program that was going on while we were there. They were actively putting together the film program while we were going to school there, right?
Yeah.
But what we were actually seeing was actually URI trying to get more in line with the conformity of all of the not universities around us, but like Emerson and Berkeley and stuff like that. The private schools there. What's the term I'm looking for?
The private colleges.
Yeah, no, but there's like there's a term I'm thinking of, but I can't pull out of my head right now. But essentially they wanted to fall in line with these conservatories, with this conservatory nature of theater, and they realized that in order to do that, they needed to beef up some of the stuff going on behind the scenes as well, right? They needed so many. The problem was they had 300 kids and 290 of them wanted to be actors, and they were like, we need to maybe produce some behind the scenes people too, so that we can focus on maybe 100 of these kids instead. It was like just to keep those numbers are not hard and fast, but it was essentially the math that they were doing was like, if we want to produce better shows, then we need to stop letting everybody just get the chance. We need to start actually focusing on, we're actually casting these shows and actually like designing these shows and all of that. So it was cool for us because it was innovative for URI to be doing these things, but it wasn't innovative in the world of college theater in any way.
Yeah.
To suddenly have a sound design course like that. No, they were actually very much behind the times on that.
Yeah, it's not like the sound design was new. We just discovered sound design in 2004.
Right.
Congratulations.
Exactly. Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm pretty sure that like sound has been a part of movies since 1912, right?
Right. And I mean, but that's a thing you need to like everybody needs to really keep an eye on that kind of shit, because you look at a program and you think, oh yeah, they're doing new and impressive things here, and it's just like, well, new and impressive to them, but you need to step back and think about like, what is everybody else around them doing? And if they're just kind of just trying to keep up, that's not the school being innovative. That's the school making a financial decision because they've realized that they've started to lose people to these other things in the area. Like that ain't it, right? What you want to find is that first school that's trying something that nobody else is, and look at that. Even that should be questioned in some way, but like that is already a better situation for me than anything. It's part of the reason that I liked all of a sudden being out in the middle of fucking nowhere and going into Bowling Green State University as opposed to URI, because URI is right there in the middle of a very big alt scene out there, right? And whereas like, being right outside of Toledo, Ohio, kind of put BG in a position to really be kind of pushing the envelope in a lot of ways for what they were trying to do, more so than URI. But even BG started to fall back into some patterns that I didn't like, and that's why I'm not there anymore. Innovation and progress and all of this in like the creative field, whether it's podcasting, theater, even just like music production and all of this stuff, like it it always pushed us before in the past, and I don't know how much it's pushing us anymore because everybody has a phone that they can get perfectly serviceable recording on, and people are happy to do that. And like podcasting is a great example of, I think we've kind of plateaued at this point because there's so many little programs that we can cobble together to do what we want. There's no innovation. There's no reason to create this. There's no motivation for innovation, right? Like there's no reason to create this other thing that I'm talking about, this like boutique style program just for podcasting, because why would you, when everything out there comes with a recording software or there's a free one available? Okay, then I guess we just won't focus on this, which is fine. Is podcasting, it's not detrimental to everybody's health, but at some point, like, we start to kind of lose that across the board in the arts, and that sucks.
Yeah. Which, I guess, this is where I'm going to use this to springboard. Is it wrong that I feel nervous about the 70,000 jobs that have been lost in the tech sector in 2023? Like, it bothers me. Like, well, I don't...
But the thing to think about there is that's not 70,000 people that are sitting around inventing the next Google. That was 70,000 people that were being paid to do data entry and things like that. Like, I'm not trying to diminish the jobs these people were doing.
Well, you really did, though. I know that,
but there's a difference. We're not talking about losing 70,000 people that I worked in a bloat job in tech. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'll point to the Netflix job that I mentioned earlier. I was in a building with 300 people, and there was so little to do for 300 people that they had a TV for every person on the wall, and you had the ability to put on whatever you wanted on that TV and just sit around for 8 hours a day and watch Netflix. And I would say out of that day, during the busy times, we definitely got nonstop calls. If a new movie came out that like pissed everybody else off, or if Hulu put out a show and everybody wanted to know if Netflix was going to have it, like we would get those busy days. But the majority of the time, we just kind of sat around watching Netflix. If you walked into that room, you'd be forgiven for thinking, man, we could probably stand to lose about 40% of these people and still run okay. Because most days you'd be right. The problem was there'd always be that one day where you weren't. And it was for Netflix, it was easy math. We'd rather pay people to sit around and not do much, right? But now look at where Netflix is. Here we are 4 years later. I'm curious to know if they still hold that attitude, right? And those are the kinds of jobs those are the majority of the jobs that were lost. The other side of that is also we're starting to see the cracks in a lot of the promises that were being made. The easiest one to point to is Elon Musk. I don't want to sit here and just turn this into like shit on Elon for the next 20 minutes. So this is going to be the last I say about it. But when a guy in his position starts kind of mouthing off and gets caught in a bunch of bullshit, like has happened to him in the last year and a half, right? There's a lot more scrutiny that then starts to go on in all of this other stuff he's had his hands in. And he's the kind of guy who has hands in everything. I mean, he's partly responsible for Chat GPT, which we've talked about on this very show, like when we talked about some of the AI stuff. Like he has been everywhere, and that means all of those industries are now questionable because we now know the kind of person he might actually be. People are starting to wonder, man, all this stuff that we've been putting a bunch of money into, we need to check that. And lo and behold, they look into it and they're like, this company hasn't produced anything in 5 years. We don't need to be doing this. So there was a lot of bloat in tech, and that is definitely something that needed to be corrected. The problem is that in this country, all that means is people are fired. It's not, hey, let's push for another product to try, hey, let's create an offshoot company to try. Like there's no attempt to take those jobs and put them in the right place. So we had 70,000 jobs that were just not doing what they needed to be doing. So those jobs definitely needed to go. The problem is that nobody then turned around and said, but here's 70,000 other jobs that do need to be done. And it's not that they don't exist. Look at the energy sector. Think about all those people that every time somebody talks about shutting down the coal industry and people lose their shit because there's so many families out there that are so dependent on the coal industry to keep them afloat. And we've learned that what you need to do is you need to start educating and opening up options for those people to move into clean energy solutions like, wind farms and solar panels. And if you do that, you're not saying to somebody, hey, we're going to shut down your industry and you're out of luck. You're saying to somebody, we're going to move you into a position that's going to keep you going for the rest of your life. And that's the thing, is that you should be worried about. Not that we lost 70,000 jobs, but that nobody in tech is bothering to recreate those jobs right now, because we're going to end up needing them again. What we've really done is we've cut our legs off for whatever future innovation we were trying to work on. That's the thing that's upsetting to me.
I mean, I guess where it bothers me, and where it's something that it's not like keeping me up at night. It's not one of those situations where it's keeping me up at night. I will admit that. But it's one of those things where I think about our world right now. And right now, the world is not in a great place. Like, that's just objectively the truth of the matter, right? Like, we're seeing inflation. We're heading towards another recession. Things are not great on the planet Earth, right?
Yeah.
Wars going, like, all of that, right? And then I look at those jobs, and that same line of bull that we were sold growing up, that college is a necessity in order to survive in this world, what that morphed and evolved into was, if you want to succeed later in life, go into computers, right? Learn to code. This is the future. And now we're seeing that future completely, as you said, have its legs cut out from under it. And it's just... So what are these people supposed to do? What are we supposed to do as a species? Because eventually we're going to have more people than jobs to be done.
I mean, we need to stop caring so much about bottom line bullshit. Like, we need to make sure, and when I say that, I don't mean we need to create more businesses losing money. We just need more businesses that don't care about making as much money as the current ones do. Because within all of this conversation is also all of these companies then reporting record profits and CEOs getting higher pay. So, like, there's this whole other side to it where, like, as much as it feels like there's this huge downfall in what people like you and I and our listeners are out there dealing with, is, like, yeah, we're in shit positions and the industry looks like crap. But, the guy 2 steps ahead of me actually is now making an extra 6 figures a year because of bonuses and profit numbers and shit like that. And that just sucks. To be like, I don't understand. I was under the impression this company was doing so bad you needed to lay off, 10,000 people. Why are you suddenly then walking into a shareholder meeting and talking about how you've made 200% over projected profits this year, right? Like, that kind of shit. So the second that we stop caring about that shit, and we can say, hey, that money, rather than pumping it all into bonuses and bullshit, why don't we put that money towards things like innovation and research and development of other shit? Like, we might actually get somewhere. And the problem is that this is why I pointed at the whole stuff with Musk and all of that, is that that's kind of what we were promised was going on. And what we found out with this cut of 70,000 people is that just simply wasn't true, right?
Yeah.
And, like, it's the idea that we need to have an industry of some kind that is pushing us, that is progressing us through time. That is, humanity has always required that. Some invention has burst up, created a need for a bunch of people to learn how to do it so that it can be spread to the masses, and then, like, from there we grow, we progress. And that's when I say that we've kind of plateaued in a lot of places. Like, that's what I mean, is like we've really kind of hit that point where like, if we don't have a bunch of people around trying shit, no matter how silly it is, like, we're not gonna find that next thing that suddenly sets this all off for everybody. But nobody wants to take those kinds of risks anymore, because too many people have gotten used to seeing higher numbers every year for their company profits and seeing higher numbers every year on their paycheck. So like, it's this weird place that we find ourselves in now, where, like, we all know that everything needs to fucking change, and we just don't have any, I don't know, like, I don't want to sit here and be like, nobody's got any gumption anymore to fight for themselves. I also don't want to be like, anarchy, like, let's go out and eat the rich. I don't know where I want to fall on it. And that's a problem, right? I think that is part of the problem, is that nobody knows how they want to handle the issue. They can all acknowledge it, but nobody knows what they want to do about it.
I mean, look back to the Occupy Wall Street, right? This is already sounds archaic when I say those words,
right? Yeah.
But the fact that it is the 1% who are controlling so much wealth, it honestly feels like it's a paywall. It's a paywall that, like, the 99% literally cannot break down. because they just don't have that resource. Because at the end of the day, that's the resource. That's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Is that like wrong? Am I reading that incorrectly? Or is it just the fact that like at the end of the day, they'll still have almost unlimited resources against all of the hard work that we throw against them to try to change things?
I think it feels that way.
Yeah.
I wish it didn't, and I don't think that it necessarily is the case in every situation. You know, like
Yeah.
yeah, sure, going up against Disney as like one person that wants to like draw Winnie the Pooh on the wall in protest of China, right? Like that feels like a David and Goliath story, but you know, everybody forgets that David wins that one. You know, so like there's I don't know, man. It's this idea being that we need to be willing to take a risk, lose a little bit of money, and do this shit. But the problem is that we have been the ones to do that for so long. When I say we need to start doing that shit, what I mean is they. I mean these people that run these companies, these people that are laying all these people off. One of them has to fucking like grow up and say like, you know what? Maybe this year I don't do this, and instead we create a whole other side of this to this company to start doing something that actually is going to keep these people employed and is going to keep us moving forward and is maybe going to grow our industry. And they just nobody wants to do that, and whether that's because of the last 4 years of dealing with COVID and everybody freaking the fuck out and nobody wanting to do anything, like, but it was going on before that too, so that's not really an excuse. I don't know.
You know what's weird to me? This is something that I've noticed recently, and it's a departure from really the hellscape that we were just gazing upon. And, so we can go back to it if you feel the need, but I don't really know what else to say about it. Like, it's just
no, I don't feel the need to sit in that any longer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But it's something that's been weighing on me lately, right? As I see just everything that I've seen this week. This week has really kind of brought me down as I view that stuff. And, like, I'm happy to have a job. Like, it's one of those situations where, like, maybe I'm not as fulfilled in my job as I was maybe like 3 years ago before everything went pear-shaped. But, like, I am happy to have it because I see the people who don't. But completely divorced from that and moving forward, I feel like people don't know how to get sick anymore. And maybe you can approve, deny what I'm saying here is that in the wake of the pandemic, so there was the whole politicalization of mask wearing, right? But undeniably, when people were wearing masks, right? Those people who were wearing masks, like, we saw record lows of the flu. We saw record lows of just illness in general. Like, less people got sick because we were trying to fight against the big boogeyman, that all the little boogeymen also lost some of their power. And the reason I say this, the reason I bring it up is, and I'm sorry to like put you on blast here, is a lot of people that I know had like the stomach flu or stomach bugs these past 2 weeks. And I feel like they did not know how to handle it at all. Like, it's just been so long since they've had to address illness that they lost that skill.
I've been getting sick for 5 years. Going in and out of the house doesn't change that. I was lucky that COVID was only hit the family once, but we've had other illnesses. Like, it's not like COVID suddenly took over and like every other disease decided to sit back for 5 years.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying though. But it isn't. But I just saw, I guess in my personal circle, like nobody got the flu the last 3 flu seasons.
No, well, I think this is actually even like posted like knowledge at this point from the scientific community is that like a bunch of people deciding to stay in the house or wearing masks when they went out definitely made those numbers go down, right? But and like that was great, and like God forbid we look at that information and do anything with it though. Like
there's where we should be innovating. I'm just saying.
You're not wrong. Imagine if we instead had one of these companies decide, you know what, why don't we create a task force that can help us figure out what to do the next time everybody has to work from home and internet loads get crazy again and shit like that. No, God forbid we look at anything like that. Because what's happened for the last 5 years couldn't it possibly ever happen again in our lifetime, Devon? Why would we consider it again?
I mean, that's... But to be hella morbid about it, that's what they said when Little Rock happened, right? Like I don't Columbine, all these things that like these are going to be one things, and then because we never addressed them when they were new, like look at the shootings that we deal with every fucking day in America, and it's just. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to
You
be like
said
that.
you weren't going to keep looking back at
I
the health
know,
case.
I understand that, but like you talk about like it's never going to happen again in our lifetimes. It's just like such a weird way of looking at it. I guess for me it's the fact that like all of these people, a stomach bug is something that pre-COVID, right, was just something you had and you kind of dealt with, right? But like watching all
I'm
these people who
curious to know how you quote unquote dealt with stomach bugs, because for me it's lie in bed for 3 days and don't
right, and
move
that's
too
the
much
thing,
before you
but it's
puke.
like I, and that is it, right? I mean, me, I don't even know. I probably have a stomach bug all the fucking time. I don't understand. Like, I don't know what would like. That's about my health. We don't need to talk about that here. But it's just like, but I guess it's just like people talking about it and the way they're talking about it, like they'd never had a stomach bug before. Like not you, right? Like you had a stomach bug, you dealt with it the way that you dealt with it. But I mean it like at my business or in other facets of life, people being like, "Oh, I got this stomach bug and it's completely destroying me." And it's just like, are we being more alarmist about disease now because of what COVID did?
No, the scarier option is that COVID weakened a lot of people,
Yeah,
man.
right? Like that. So there's the thing there too, right? Like it's now things are hitting harder because of the factors of long COVID. It's just something I haven't noticed. Like this is the first sort of outbreak of disease that wasn't pan or epidemic level,
Yeah.
right? Where like it seemed like everybody had this stomach bug. Like on my social media or at work, I saw people like people were not in because they had this disease, and people just like not knowing how to deal with it.
Yeah, yeah. So we ended up actually all with the flu is what it was this week,
Okay,
and
okay.
the doc was basically just like, "Yep, you got that good old fashioned sickness." And what had happened was that for me at least, the headache was so severe and so specifically placed like in my head, in my headspace, that it was just making me dizzy whenever I would walk around. So that's where the stomach stuff started to come from. Was
I got
just
you.
like
So
I literally
nausea, the and
can't.
vertigo. Fun. That
Yeah,
sounds
yeah,
like a blast,
exactly. Yeah.
Sejohn.
I literally looked at the floor at one point and thought, did I get taller? And I was just like, oh no, your eyes are just legitimately just not working properly. Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy. But it did definitely hit harder because we weren't as sick over the last few years. But like, I famously always get a summer like cold of some kind, and I was still getting those. That just it was I was able to handle it a lot better. I mean, hey, I wasn't expected to go anywhere. So getting it was not there was no stress level, there was no social stress involved in getting sick. So even though I was still getting sick, it was not nearly as bad as it would have been outside of the COVID lockdowns, because outside of the COVID lockdowns, I would have felt responsible for still going into the office, getting, running errands, being out with people in a way that, no, sorry, like we're all locked in here anyway, so like I'm going to chill out. And then lo and behold, without those kinds of stressors on me, my body was able to get over shit a little bit quicker and a little bit faster, a little bit better, right? Now, well, this past week, couple of weeks that we were kind of doing the rotation through the house of everybody getting sick, it was kind of one of those things again where it's like, shit, we were supposed to have people come over. One of them was pregnant. Do we want to like reach out to them, let them know what's going on? Also, like, we need to get some grocery shopping done. We didn't think to like stock the house. Like there was all of this shit that was suddenly just stressing us all out. So in addition to the fact that we were all feeling sick, we had that stress, and it made it go on for 2 fucking weeks in this house. It sucks.
Yeah. And I guess that's what I'm talking about. Is that this feels like the first pre-COVID type of sickness
Yeah,
where people have that feel like, oh, I'm sick, and what is that going to mean for my job, right? Should I call out? I should call out because I was supposed to call out now, like with the way that we're viewing illness after COVID. But and that's just what I'm seeing. I mean, for me, one of the other like administrators in our building was sick the last 2 days of the week, and people like didn't know what to do without them there. And it's like, have you never had a person be sick before? Like, I it just it felt very strange. And
yeah,
I guess in a weird way, that strangeness to me is sort of the first waving of the flag that we're outside of the pandemic. Whether
sure.
or not that means that COVID is gone, it's just the way that like we're
socially.
approaching sickness on a social level.
Yeah,
Yeah,
socially
exactly.
we have definitely started to move on, which is not, I mean, this is not news. It's just it's kind of the first time it's hitting.
Yeah, it's the first time that like people are annoyed that people are sick.
Yeah, I think that's really
Yeah,
the
that's what it
bigger
is. You
thing,
know,
right?
that's yeah.
Is it's not that people themselves don't know how to handle being sick. It's that now nobody else knows what to do with them. Because I think the one of the bigger like things that we need to be very careful about as we roll through into this period is the ways in which our companies or businesses or jobs ask us when we're sick to quote unquote make up for it, and I whatever that may be, that's going to be different in a lot of situations, but the number one that I'm scared of the most is we have proven to these companies that we are capable of working from home, right? And so this idea now is, at what point are we going to start seeing people saying, well, I'm sick, but it's low key, so I'm going to just work from home today, which is fine. But if that becomes like the company standard for, oh yeah, if you're going to take a sick day, you're still expected to work. You're just going to do it from home. So maybe you have like a different workload, not necessarily a lighter workload, right? And it's just like, well, what the hell? Like that's not, the people are not going to get better in that case. And in fact, that's going to be worse, because how many people now that would have just taken the day off and rested are now going to be expected to still produce on that day?
Yeah.
And we can't let that happen. We can't, because like then people are going to get sick and never get better.
Right. And that's sort of what was weakening us anyway, right?
Right.
Was the fact that, like, yeah, we're all kind of sick, but because we're soldiering on for our jobs, like, it's why we were so surprised by what COVID produced in terms of, like, the
Oh,
death count
the,
and the,
I think we got like a dozen memos at my job constantly telling us what day the office would be reopening. Like, hey, well, so we're going to close the office for like 2 weeks just to be careful. We've decided to bump that back to a month. You know what? We're going to just wait till the 4th of July. You know, well, once the school year starts and the kids are back at school, we'll get you back in the office. Like, constantly pushing back that date, but never wanting to admit, hey, we don't know how long this is going to last, right?
I mean, I worked in the office all of 2020,
Mm.
and it was January 2021. Like, I guess it was the third surge that it happened, where
Yeah.
I was told, please begin working from home. And I'm just like, oh, okay. Like, that would have been nice
A year ago?
a
Yeah.
year ago. Like,
Yeah.
it just seems so strange to me.
Mhm.
And I guess I've never really viewed sickness as a weird metric for society and where we are socially until now. And this whole surge of how people are reacting to it's been very interesting to me.
Society can only ever be judged by the way it treats its weakest people. Like
That's
that's like that is that's straight from the Greeks, right? Like
yeah.
that's the thing is we don't. The problem is that we were for a long time, and probably will still even after all this, not look at like illnesses amongst the masses as like a weakness. We think of it as something that just is like a stumbling block that we need to overcome, because the idea is we are taught you get sick, you get better, which is not good, because that's just simply not the case. Any illness that you get has the potential and most likely will cause lifelong term effects, right? Even like think about like a kid getting the flu when they're younger, and then like we find out when they're 30, like yeah, your lungs have just never been good, and it's because when your lungs were literally developing, you got this terrible illness, right? Like that kind of shit happens all the time. But we've never, for some reason, when somebody says I am sick, considered that. We always think, well, once you're better, let's do this. We never think, well, shit, this person might not get better. We don't want to, right? Like it's a
Yeah.
very bleak way to look at illness. But unfortunately, by not looking at it properly, it does then put us in a lot of really awkward positions socially to be like, well, no, you don't understand. When I say that I'm sick, I mean forever now. And people are just, I mean, like, I'm not gonna, I don't want to get too deep or drop too much on for somebody that is not here to speak for themselves. But we are dealing with a case of what we've come to know as long COVID in the house. It's wild. Somebody that we had when we had COVID, they got over all of the contagious parts of it, and it's not in their system anymore. But some of the symptoms that it created have just stuck around. And lo and behold, we found out there's an entire clinic out here dedicated to studying this because it is a common enough effect that like they're like, we need to make sure we get on this ASAP. There's that innovation that we're talking about caused because people were literally dying, right? Like that's all it took was, just a couple of thousand lives in the area for somebody to be like, maybe we actually figure out what the fuck is going on. But like that idea that like this person is now in this position where like nope, they're sick. And when people when we try and explain to people like this is what it is, they're just like, oh, so is this like is this been something going on for a few weeks? And it's like, no, this has been something going on for like a year. Like this is not something that they're just gonna like get over. We may, like, there's potential, there's all of this research and all of this other stuff going on, but we have to prepare ourselves. You have to gear yourself up for that possibility of it just not working. Like, and this is something that anybody with any type of long-term illness understands, is that other people just don't understand, is that you're going to now live in a world where you're going to probably have to over-explain yourself. You're probably going to have to make things weird and awkward with friends, family, and coworkers when you have to explain why you can't do a thing or shouldn't do a thing. Like it is the ways in which, and this is probably an America thing. Like we should make sure that we clarify that obviously this situation could be very different in other countries, but in America, like, illness is just treated as this thing that you'll eventually get over, and when you do, we expect you to be back to work the next day. Like
if you could be back to work the same day, right? Like sleep for 3 more hours.
Right. If you could figure out exactly when the illness will magically leave your body and make sure that at that exact moment you are then back in society and turning the wheels that you need to be turning, like, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Ugh. All right. This has been a lot of fun. Is there anything fun you want to talk about this week? Have you done anything cool?
Because I was sitting on my ass for a few days. I decided that I was gonna go out and catch me some Pokemon.
Look at you catching some Pokemon. What'd you play?
So with a lot of the stuff that we talked about with the Nintendo stuff last week, right, and some of our disappointments with some of the announcements on things like pricing and stuff, I pointed out that, like, Nintendo, for all of the shit that we give them about pricing and shit never going on sale and stuff, they've started to really kind of lean into, when a new game comes out, the last game gets $20 knocked off or something like that, right? And that's kind of what's going on with the Pokemon games, at least I think up to this very moment. I don't know how much longer their sale's going on, but essentially, Sword and Shield specifically are $60, but if you want there's like a pass associated with it that you can. So there's basically the standard version that people buy now is the $70 version, lo and behold, that has this like expansion pass included in it and stuff. But the $60 version had been on sale for $50. And I was like, well, what the hell? I got some Christmas money left over, and I'm sitting on my ass doing nothing. And so I went out and I got a Pokemon game. I picked up this. Which one did I pick up? Shield. I picked up Shield.
Shield.
Yeah, Shield. I keep.
I like Shield. I'm not gonna lie. That's the one I.
So like, there's okay. So the big thing here is like this is kind of really the first Pokemon game that like me aware gamer Sejohn like is playing, right? Like I had my hands on Pokemon before. I've probably talked about this enough that like I'm aware of what it is. It was more the show for me than it was ever the games. I even had, I think, more cards. Like I spent more time trading cards back and forth than I ever did in the video games. So it's been, every time a Pokemon comes out, it's been this kind of like nagging feeling for me of like, is this the one that I should try? Is this the one that I should try? And it's never quite hit. There's always been some reason why it just hasn't been worth it this time, including Sword and Shield when they first came out. There was a lot of push against some stuff in those games. The big hook for the Sword and Shield games is Dynamaxing. Again, I don't play these games often, but from what I understand, like every Pokemon game kind of comes with its specialty, like what's the right word here? It's not really an attack. Gimmick. That's a great that's exactly the word.
Yeah.
Like they all come with a different gimmick, right? And the gimmick for this one is the Dynamaxing, which was something that I had heard from a lot of people just was underwhelming in some regards, but more specifically, I kept hearing that like it was just kind of pointless. And I was like, oh man, that's so that sucks. And it doesn't come back. Like since Sword and Shield, we have not seen Dynamaxing, which makes sense now that I've played this game, right? Like I'm looking like now that I've played it for a few hours, I have not gotten to my first gym yet, but I just got past the opening ceremony. So for anybody that's tracking, I think that puts me about 5 hours in. I've spent a lot of time in that first wild region that you get to, just kind of catching Pokemon because like I've never done this before, right? And so like I'm just spending a lot of my time just kind of like trying to get a feel for what the loop really should be. Because when I was younger, you know, when I had, I think red was what we had in the house. When I was younger and was playing red, the loop, as I understood it, was like take this Pokemon and go where they tell you to go, which is to the next town. Then they tell you to go to the gym, so you go to the gym, and then you get your ass kicked at the gym, and it's just like, well, shit. I guess I should go out and find some Pokemon. So I go out and find enough Pokemon, then go into the gym and kind of still get my ass kicked, but like go through the gym enough times that you basically end up grinding your guys and then finally getting through. As far as I understood it, that's how you played Pokemon. Then I slowly started to realize that people were like taking their time with Pokemon. Like, and this is so like me no longer playing the game because I decided I don't want to play a game like this. It's just not doing it for me. Finding out that like the ways that people that love Pokemon play Pokemon was so different. Not that it's like right or wrong, but funny enough, anybody out there that seems to really like Pokemon is playing in some very specific ways that I just wasn't. You know, things like spending your time catching all the various Pokemon in an area, because not only does that help you fill out your Pokedex, something I never thought was like the point of Pokemon. Like, and I'm not saying that I think it was pointless. I was just like, oh, that's a cool little add-on that you can do if you want to waste some time, but that's not the game. No, that's the game. Like going out and catching everything, seeing everything, fighting everything so that you can learn certain things about it. I mean, yes, types, right? Like that's the very first thing. But like this one, I don't know when they introduced this, but once you go up against a certain type with whatever Pokemon you've got, you can actually then anytime you come up against that exact type of Pokemon, you've actually tracked what is an effective move or super effective move. Like that was not there when I was playing Pokemon
No,
back
that
in the
was
day.
added. I want to say with X and
X
Y.
and Y,
That's
yeah,
when I
like
noticed it. It
like
might have been in black and
tracking,
white. I
yeah,
never
like
played those,
tracking
so
effectiveness and stuff like that. Like that was really cool. Like little things like that. And that's the thing that I will say is, as somebody that did not play these games since like the Game Boy era, the quality of life changes that exist in this game to make kind of the stuff that led me down the wrong path back in the day. Like the idea that in this one you carry around the ability to get into your boxes at any time to find other Pokemon. You don't have to go to a Poke Center to change up your team. It's not across the board. They make it very clear that you won't be able to use this device everywhere. But the fact that you were handed a device that allows you to get in and trade out your team and work on managing your team on the fly is huge for me. Because when I was playing back in the day, and part of the reason that I was playing the way that I was playing is like I didn't want to be in menus managing shit all the time. I wanted to be fighting with Pokemon. Like I wanted to be doing these things. And they've really streamlined a lot of that sort of stuff by the time you get to Sword and Shield, lo and behold, 20 years later. For some people that may actually be a revelatory statement, because there's so many people out there that treat every Pokemon release like nothing has changed in 20 years. And I am here to say that that is simply just not the case. Like as somebody that could not touch these games because of my experience 20 years ago, this has been fun. You know, and part of that is because I've changed as a gamer for sure,
mhm.
but part of that is also just the stuff that they have done. So right now I'm in a real good place with it. I'm having a great time with it. You know, I'm curious to see how much drive I have to get through the entire game. There's a part of me that is worried that I'm going to do like I often do when I kind of dive into these old dives. It happened to me this very same week. I actually before Pokemon could get to me, I had a couple of days where I was waiting for it to be delivered. So I bought digitally for $10 Okami on the Switch. I haven't touched it since I played it once on some PlayStation. Some friend of mine that owned a PlayStation 2 like way back in the day. Like I haven't touched it since then. But I was like, yeah, it's a beautiful game. I've always loved the way it looks, and I haven't played it in a long time. So like, this is something I can fill the time with for the
And
next
it's
couple of
Zelda
days.
adjacent, right? Like I've never played it.
Oh, it is it's really wild. So it comes out in April of 2006, and then in September of 2006, Twilight Princess comes out, and holy shit, I'm playing this, and I was like, if this did not come out the same year as Twilight Princess, I would say Twilight Princess owes half of its gameplay to Okami. The wolf play, the way that you play as the wolf in Twilight Princess is basically like the entirety of Okami. Like you just run around, you pick up these powers that allow you to go back to older places and get into the places you couldn't get before. You're collecting pieces of health that then develop into large pieces that you put together, right? Like there's all sorts of wild shit. The big thing that Okami does over a Zelda game is there's a fighting mechanic that like the combat mechanics of it are so unique to Okami. For anybody that doesn't know, the way that you play that game is you paint, right? So you can pause the screen and draw a circle in the sky and the sun appears, and this may help plants grow. Or you can do a slash across the screen and that's an attack, it slashes them. Or if you color them in, like if you muddy them up, it covers them in ink when time unfreezes, and that is a good block move for certain characters. So there's this whole like fighting combat mechanic to it that elevates it beyond the Zelda nature. But besides that, it is unabashedly a Zelda game, right? Like, and then, like I said, and then not like 6 months later, like Twilight Princess comes out, you'd be forgiven for sitting down and being like, did they play Okami? Did they? Because a lot of this feels like it came straight from Okami. But no, they came out the same year. So as far as I could tell, like they would not have really known what the other was doing, right? So it's just wild that in that same year we got those same two games. Yeah. So it's very Zelda adjacent. So playing that, going back to it, I hit a point where I was like, this was really fun, but I don't really have the motivation to keep going. I paid $10 for this game, definitely got $10 out of it. Still beautiful, still have access to it if I ever want to go back to it. Great. I'm going to put this on the shelf for a while, especially because I knew like I have this other game coming that I want to play. So I'm curious to see how long how deep into this I get, right? Like, am I going to suddenly like get super into this and become the Pokemon master? I doubt that. I just don't think I've got that in me, but we'll find out. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know where you're going to go with it. I hope that you finish it, because you asking that question of which one would you recommend, Sword or Shield. I remember that conversation. You sent it. You asked Dale that. And my thought was Shield is the one that I played for like real. Like when I'm choosing between the two, that's the one I want to do. And then I had a snow day and I borrowed Dale's copy of Sword with the goal of just beating it in the time that I was going to be at work.
Yeah.
Right. So 8 hours essentially. And I did it, like just focusing on the story after having known what the story was through my Shield playthrough. I got through the game in 8 hours and I had a good time with it. But then I'm like that's uniquely my approach to those games. And I have not felt that way about a Pokemon game since. Like the last Pokemon game that got me excited for real, I don't know why I said that, was Pokemon X and Y. Yeah. And the reason why that connected with me is there was like a battle mansion where you could just train up your team.
Right.
And that was after the second gym. So I had a team of level 100 Pokemon before I went to the third gym. Because I was having such a blast, like just fighting and training them and experimenting with the six things that I had up to that point.
I get it.
So good.
No, I know, I get it, and I've been making the conscious decision to try and trade certain ones out so that I don't like over level or I don't things like that, because I have a tendency to do that kind of stuff too. But like when it came time for me to pick the number for my uniform, you know what I did?
What'd you do?
24/7, because I'm always on that grind.
That's better than 420 or 69, which were the first two guesses that I had.
I know everybody keeps saying that to me. What is this? I have succeeded in successfully putting a persona out into the world, I guess.
Nice. Yeah, it's like that's, I don't know. And X and Y is that, and then before that, like the Pokemon Leaf Green
Yeah.
I bought it. I had it on my Game Boy Micro. Remember the Game Boy Micro? Like
Jeez,
everybody
man.
had one around
Yeah.
us. It was perfect for theater. Being backstage, busting out a Game Boy
Yes.
Micro
Yes. I
was
was gonna
so
say
good.
I never owned a Game Boy Micro, but I remember there being a time in my life where I felt like everybody was on theirs. And you're right, it was when we were backstage at shows and stuff.
Yeah,
Everybody would just like sit there and pull it out. Yeah. If you didn't
because
have a sidekick, you had a great Game Boy Micro.
yeah, and because they were $40, it was a $40 Game Boy for the
Right.
price of a game you could get. And it was so small. It was great. It was fantastic. The graphic fidelity was pretty good for being such a small device.
Yeah.
I'm just living in the world right now. And I bought Leaf Green on that. So the remake of Red and Blue. And what I decided was I'm going to catch a Pokemon, I'm going to evolve it to its highest, and then I'll switch out to the next one. And I'm going to fully complete each route as I go. And I got through to the Diglett Tunnel. So that's like the 4th town.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, I'm bored now. This isn't fun.
Right, yeah, but
And,
you know,
like,
like if you hit that
I
point
burnt
of the
myself
game,
out, essentially.
yeah, like that there's definitely if I am a big believer that if you hit a point with that with a game, just walk away. Like forcing yourself to finish a thing that you're not in the mood to finish. And this goes for like TV shows, movies, music, any of that stuff. Like if you hit a point where you're not having fun anymore, don't feel the need to keep going. But if you find that you constantly find yourself in this position with games where you're like, I'm not having fun anymore, and I'm literally only like 15 hours into this
You
game,
might be the problem.
then you might want to think about the ways in which you're taking that game in to see if you can mitigate any of that. You know, maybe you can't. Maybe it is legitimately just like this is the way that you play games. In that case, I will point to like 10 and 15-hour games that you should play rather than trying to get in these 60-hour games and see what you can do in that time. But you know, like there's definitely stuff that I do personally that I'm just like, if I'm not careful, I'm gonna burn myself out on this shit. You know, I'm the kind of guy where if I hear a new song and I like it, it'll be number one on my Spotify play every time I step in the kitchen. And sure enough, within 2 weeks, I'm done with the song. You know, it's very hard for me to like remind myself like, hey, you like don't do this, don't don't use this time up. But you know, it's also not hugely important or detrimental to me in that regard. Now, a $60 video game, $50 video game in this case, that has a different feel to it, right? Like I don't really want to waste my time with this. Like I don't want to burn through this thing and then like be done with it and never touched again. The other thing is that like I also want to try possibly someday Sword. I want to see what it's like doing some of the online battles and stuff that they've got integrated into this. I am curious about a lot of the like bells and whistles on this one, and so I don't want to get so burned out on the game I don't experience all of that either. But it's been cool. It's been really fun. Like we set up in the living room. We have an L-shaped couch, right? And we have and the nook on it is just big enough for the queen size air mattress that we have as well. So what we'll do is we'll blow the air mattress up, fit it into the nook, and then like it's just giant bed, right? And we'll just sit on that and play video games. And we often do this when we're all like when it's a snow day or all sick or something like that. We'll just it looks like fucking Willy Wonka, like the grandparents in the bed, But I set up in there, started playing the beginning of the day. Everybody got in on helping me like name all of them, and every time we saw like a cute one, like we would try and figure out like if it was over leveled or not, or if it was worth trying to go and capture it and that. And it's been a fun time. And I think that's the other thing about this particular one that has been a blast is the fact that I can play it on my TV is a huge thing for me. Like handheld systems have their place. I'm not here to be like everybody that plays the Game Boy is obviously childish. Like I've just never. It's never been immersive for me. I've never been able to get into a game that's been on a handheld system. And this goes for the Switch. When I've had to be in handheld mode, I only ever really do that with games that I've been playing for a while that I don't really need to be paying too much attention to. Like I'll handheld Stardew any day of the week now because I've put 1,500 hours into that game on various platforms. So throwing that in a handheld mode and mindlessly poking at the screen for a couple of hours, easy peasy. I eventually get to that moment with any of the Mario Rabbids games, right? Where like I've been playing this game for 20 hours. I'm just going through to like 100% completionist of this. I don't really need it on the big screen anymore. But very importantly to me, I didn't want to ever get to important story beats in those games without being on the TV to watch them, right? Like, so if I was like, oh, okay, I have completed this area, but now if I move on, I know I'm going to advance story. I turn the game off until I can get to the TV to play it. That is a very measured thing for me. And so having a Pokemon game that I can do that with, that I can have on the big screen, that my family can sit there and like ooh and ah over the cute Pokemon with me and things like that is really cool. Like it's really cool to be playing that way. And this is not hugely revelatory. People have been, playing Pokemon on these types of things for years. It's why I was always more into like Pokemon Snap or Pokemon Stadium than I ever was into the mainline Pokemon releases, back in the N64 days.
Well, I mean, so you had the Super Game Boy to play the first two games on.
Yeah.
And then you kind of had Game Boy Player for, Ruby, Sapphire, Fire Red,
for the
Green.
GameCube.
For
Is
the
that what you're talking about?
GameCube,
Yeah.
But then there was like the fourth game through the seventh game were pretty much portable exclusive.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a lot going on the other way. Pokemon became the game for the portable system at the time.
It became Nintendo's way to kind of really force people onto the handheld market. It was like, Pokemon will always be this handheld experience, so you need to get our handheld game. And notably, it wasn't until some of that stuff started to wane that they finally were like, maybe we put this back on the TV.
Yeah. And I'm excited for the eventual Black and White remake, because they're just games that I never played.
Yeah.
Because I just wasn't like, I got burnt. I did not like Diamond Pearl. I enjoyed my time with it, but then
what's the hook with some of these? So what it was with Diamond Pearl.
So here's the thing: the gimmick thing that you're talking about,
yeah,
really didn't start until X and Y.
Okay.
As far as I can tell, and someone can correct me there. I mean, I guess the kind of gimmick going forward between all of them, right? So the first game is just the first game. With Gold and Silver, you set
but even that. But remember, they started with a gimmick, and that was, we're going to put two versions of this game out, and you need to connect to each other to trade certain ones, guaranteeing that you had a reason to buy more than one version of the game. And that kind of is the thing that they latch onto, and that's where I think this idea of this gimmick stuff comes later on. And it becomes less about like you need multiple versions, but more like you need to keep buying this game because it is different this time because of this one thing we promise, right? So they've always tried to create that need to push for a second purchase of some kind. And they've always done that with these games, and that is kind of gross considering who they're aimed at and all that shit, right?
Yeah. But so the first game exists. The first game, I guess that's the gimmick. Is the heart, Gold and Silver, because the heart hadn't been added yet. Was the time of day thing. You set the day of the week and you set the time at the beginning of it. Yeah. And it really just tracked the time of day. So that, like, if it was light where you were, it'd be light in the game or dark in the game.
Well, and you'd get like silly messages when it was like Christmas or something. Like somebody would say. Well, something.
I don't think that the date was necessarily part of it yet.
Yeah, eventually I know that becomes a thing because
that's what Diamond and Pearl was.
Yeah,
was a big thing of like you'd get a birthday message,
right? Because
your DS had your birthday on it and things like that. I don't know what. Omega, like Ruby Sapphire, I keep thinking about the re-releases. I couldn't tell you what Ruby Sapphire's big one was, other than the fact that now we're on the Game Boy Advance. Maybe it was the fact that you could trade the Pokemon forward, because with the remake of Red and Blue, they introduced the wireless trading. There was a wireless pack you could plug into your Game Boy and work that way. And then Diamond Pearl was definitely the date matters, because like there were Pokemon who only show up on Fridays. So that was a thing. Black and White I never played, so I don't know what
Well, Black and White was the first one that was like the 3D map, right? Where like you were like
X and Y.
So Black and White was top down, or was X and Y?
Well, Black and White was on DS and it was still top down.
Okay.
I don't know what Black and White added, other than the fact that it's the first one that has a sequel. Like, it's because they'd always come up with the later one, like your Yellow, your Crystal, your Emerald. I could have sworn
Black and White was not 2D sprites, though, right? It is 3D sprites, isn't it?
No, it's 2D.
Oh man, yeah. I must be mixing it up with X and Y.
Like X and Y was the first time that like they're 3D sprites because we're on the 3DS.
Right.
So that was the big thing there. And they also have the Heart Gold Soul Silver remake, which introduced like the basically multimeter walking game.
Oh, yep, the
Where,
pedometer that you could
yeah.
get. Yeah, yeah.
So that was where that whole thing started. And then X and Y is the fact that it is 3D, but also slight changes between the games. Oh, that's what Ruby Sapphire did. The game is different. You fight different teams depending on if you're playing on Ruby or Sapphire. One is fighting for land, one is fighting for water.
Right. Up until that point, it had just been
was always
these
just
are
Team
the
Rocket. Yeah.
well, and the difference had really only been certain Pokemon are going to be
Yeah.
exclusive to this one, and certain Pokemon are going to be exclusive to this one. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was the big one there, was the fact that you could only get Groudon if you played Ruby. You could only get the blue guy. I don't know the blue guy's name. Corrigan, maybe?
Yeah.
Don't come for me, Pokemon people. I swear it's not my job. But Sword Shield, the big thing.
Oh, it looks like Black and White might have been the first one to introduce concepts of weather, which I've noticed in Sword and Shield is important.
That could be it. I feel like that's also part of Diamond Pearl, though, because you go
Maybe.
to like an ice
Yeah.
area. But I could be wrong there. It could have been Black and White that like really had it as a play mechanic, because I don't know that one at all. I've never played it. It's the only Pokemon games I've never played. And then
What is Generation 5?
Gen 5 is Black White.
Okay, so that is the first time that you would see weather effects noted as an important factor.
Okay, yeah. So that's no idea. Did not know that till just now.
Yeah.
Then X and Y comes along. That's the first 3D sprite stuff, and the story kind of like it explains why there are two different games. Like that's what that story is all about. Is the fact that there is a parallel world created at some point. Sun and Moon explores that in Gen 7, but what Sun and Moon is, there's no gyms in it. You're in an area that don't have gyms.
Weird.
So you still have like challenges to complete,
Yeah.
but it's not specifically like the gym challenges.
Yeah.
Sword and Shield, the games are different. That's the first time that the games are different. You have two different gym leaders in Shield than someone who plays Sword will have, which is kind of gross because there's actual replayability there because of that.
Right.
And then Scarlet Violet, which I don't like Scarlet Violet. I'll go on record saying that.
Not many people do, apparently.
It's open world. It doesn't run great, but I don't really care about the run great stuff. The open world nature of it, I don't love because they sold it on these are the 3 goals of the open world, and I completed those. And then they're like, all right, cool, now you have to do this. And I'm like, but I felt like I was done. Like, it would have been cool if when I completed one of those, you could have been like, and now you have this. But the whole thing, spoilers for Scarlet and Violet, is you do the 3 types of stories, right? Which is to hunt for the Herba Mystica with this one guy to make his dog better. You fight the gyms to become the Pokemon champion. And then you fight against the evil team, which is Team Star in that. And the end game of that is to recruit the guy whose dog you helped save, the other Pokemon champion, and the person who created Team Star. And then you have like a super squad to go deal with like a time dilation that's happening somewhere else in the world.
Wild.
So, and I'm just like, oh, I thought I was just trying to do these things, right? And it's all coded in the fact that you're going to like the Hogwarts of Pokemon. I don't know what those pronunciations were, but you're going to like Pokemon Academy.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, Pokemon was always like, hey, you're 10 years old now. Take this monster and get the fuck out of my house.
Yeah.
Now, like, go to
Cast
this
off into the
magic
world.
school and learn about Pokemon. It's like, no, I don't want this. And there's so much that you have to do related to the school.
Wow.
Like, it feels like 5 hours before you can actually do anything real in the game. Like, what you discussed, I could probably get to where you are in the game within an hour.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
No, I
like
definitely could have. I spent so much
You played
time
in the
that
wild area. Right, and
Yeah.
that's fine. And that's completely fine. But also, within, like, I'm going to say half an hour conservatively, you're in the wild area. and left to your own devices.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't really
The worst,
happen.
yeah, the worst part about it is you've got the narrative of your friend that you're following, and he constantly wants to hop. Well, his name's
His
Hop.
name's Hop. Yeah.
He constantly wants to pop out of like everywhere to like slow you down. Essentially, it sucks because you could get there even faster if you could shut that dude up.
Yeah.
But I have words going as fast as they possibly can according to the menu.
Yeah. So like that one is it. So where Scarlet and Violet's like, oh, you need to do this, and it just feels like it moves so slowly in the beginning,
Yeah.
and then you realize no, that's just the game because it's not running at 60 FPS and it's not really optimized for the Switch. Like clearly they built this on computers that had better specs than the Nintendo Switch.
Yeah.
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 But you're not doing that. You're doing Sword and Shield. I think you'll have fun. I'm excited for you to get to the gym stuff. The first 3 gyms are a lot of fun. Who'd you pick as your starter is the one thing I want to know as we go on this Pokemon journey with you until you either become the very best in whatever the name of the region is. I had it. And
It's the Gala region?
The Galar region, yeah.
Yeah, Gala.
Until
yeah.
you become the champion of the Galar region or until you get bored. I'm really excited to hear how your Pokemon journey goes.
Yeah, so I picked a Grookey. Is that the grass monkey?
Grookey.
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 Yeah, I'm not sure how you say, like, these are not words you say out loud, right? Like, that's the other thing, is I cannot believe that they're this far into Pokemon and we don't have voice lines, but whatever.
It's Grookey. I'm a Grookey.
Yeah, Grookey. But I named him George. He's my little grass monkey named George.
Grass monkey.
He's also, of course, my highest level now. He's up to level 15, which is great, but like the rest of my team is down in like the 10-11 area, so I really do try to like filter him out, but I don't want to box him because if I end up in a fight I can't win. I like being able to pull him out and just have him poke him with a stick and be able to move on.
Yeah, that tracks. That's how it works. Like
yeah.
You have one overpowered guy. That's kind of just how Pokemon go.
Right. So like trying to make sure that I am balancing that out though with also not like just destroying.
Yeah. I dig it. I get behind it. That's funny that you picked a grass monkey. I like that. That's also who your brother picked. I think that's the other reason why it works for me.
That is funny. It was between that and it was between the Fire Bunny, and the Fire Bunny looked rad, but I was like, well, I'll definitely need to go find a Fire Bunny somewhere, but like the grass monkey's too good to pass up. Also, like and maybe this is just credit to the game for making me feel this way, but I also feel like every step of the way that I have gotten into a fight with him, he was the right choice, like, because if I had the water type one or the fire type one, I would have been in a disadvantage in some fashion or anything like that. And like I constantly feel like they are making me feel like I made the right choice, and I think that's purposeful on their part. I don't think that there's a wrong choice. It'd be really shitty if there was like, oh, you picked the water one, guess what, you will never finish this game. Like I think that's not how it works, right? But they have done a very good job of like patting me on the back for the decision I made.
So it's not so much that like you'll never finish this game, it's sort of the difficulty selector. Honestly, I don't know if the grass monkey is the easy mode in Sword Shield, to be just completely honest with you. I think you'll see that when you get.
I mean, it doesn't feel easy. I have definitely had like a team blackout moment because I went up against an Onyx I was not prepared for. There's definitely.
Yeah, but that was in the wild area, and it was probably like level 50, right?
It was level 26, I think, and and as I mentioned at that point, my Grookey I think was only like level 12. Yeah, no, for sure. But like, so it's not. I would hesitate to call it easy mode more than like. Specifically because up till now, like a lot of the fights you get into, you're supposed to win, if that makes sense, that kind of thing. So maybe it'll get insanely easier all of a sudden, but I think enough of the beginning of that game is evened out that I would really hesitate to say, like I said, that there is a wrong like choice. Like even if I'm assuming that the water-based one is probably the like quote unquote hard mode one.
For that game, it is very nicely evened out because the first 3 gyms are a grass gym, a water gym, and a fire gym.
Right.
So all of whatever Pokemon you pick, one of them will be at a disadvantage, but it's not like Mega Man. There is a linear path that you have to go through for those 3. So think about it there.
Yeah.
And so that where that difficulty selector really comes into play is in the first Pokemon, where if you pick Bulbasaur, the grass type, that he can just mop up the first 2 gyms.
Yeah.
without like any issue.
Especially by the time you get to him,
Yeah,
even playing the way that I played that game, I do
yeah,
remember Bulbasaur being the one that I
yeah,
picked, and part of the reason why I thought I was playing it the way that it was meant to be played was because I did get through a gym without too much issue the first time.
yeah.
So I was like, yeah, all right. And then I got into the next region, and I had like seven Pokemon. Like I didn't catch anything. I was like, and all these guys keep passing out. I don't know what to do.
Yeah. So that's it. So like that's it. Because if you pick Squirtle, the water type, he can really rock Rock's world, but then the next gym is water. So like you don't really have the advantage there the same way that you have grass.
Right.
And then if you pick Charmander, that's the unevolved form of Charizard, as a fire type,
We know
he
Pokemon.
is he is at a disadvantage against the rock type in the first gym. He is at a disadvantage against the water type in the second gym.
Right.
So it's not so much that like, I mean, you can complete any of those. It's just how much catching and training you'll have to do in order to like get good.
Yeah, I
at
mean,
the
you start
game.
talking like speedrun like tactics, right? Like obviously you want to pick Bulbasaur so that you don't have to worry about this going forward. But
Right.
if you're not playing with that mentality, you're good.
Yeah. So it's that sort of thing. And then Bulbasaur, like he I don't even know. I don't know that game well enough to like think of where it is. But like the fire gym is the 7th gym. So really Squirtle has an advantage against the first and the frickin' 7th gym in terms of that. But then like Charmander, once you get past those, like nobody's really good against the electric gym. The electric gym's kind of weird anyway. But then the 4th gym is grass, so he can just burn through that. And it's like it's weird how it's balanced out. And then like that sort of just stayed stuck to the game where like if you pick the grass starter, it's the easy one. But I don't think that's the case. It's certainly not Scarlet Violet. The fact of the matter is the fire starter has an advantage over 6 of the gyms by the time it's like fully evolved. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. Like, what? Thank you for that.
Well, yeah, because I'm also learning about multi-type, right?
Yeah.
Like that's also something that's very new to me is the idea that this one that I have actually is classified not just as a rock type, but
He's
also
grass right now, and then
Right.
he'll once he evolves, which you're close to. Spoilers. He'll grab another type, and that'll be interesting. But also, being grass type kind of means that you like dip your toe in poison a little bit. So, I mean, it's an interesting world. XY was the one that really like took everything that I knew. My favorite game as a kid was Gold Silver because it's a whole new game, and then the post game is the first game. Like both games are in there, and it's just like that's incredible to me. That then you're walking around the Johto region.
Yeah.
Well, no, Kanto is the first one. Johto is the new one. You start in Johto, and then like, well, now that you're the champion, you can go fight the Kanto region, and it is the full game. It's not like the game isn't there, or they like fast travel you to the towns. Like you can walk around the entire map.
That is actually
game,
wild. That's awesome.
Which like blew me away when I played that in like 2000, and I'm like, this is crazy. And it feels like because I know that game and everything there and the lore, it was great. It really worked for me. And then they fell off, and then playing XY, like that same sort of stuff happened to me, and I really liked that.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the lore part because I think that's the other big thing that has really got me this time that I don't think ever really got me before is and this is me not really paying attention to Pokemon for 2 decades. Like let's make that clear. But like the story going on is actually kind of interesting, right? Like I've met Chancellor Rose and I've got my my feelings about what might be going on with like that character and the fact that like this area like training to be a Pokemon trainer is like a whole industry here, whereas like in the first game it feels like it really is only something like very select few people choose to do. That like there's just a whole bunch of cool stuff going on in the world building, and I've also just met like the statue where you learn about where the concept of the sword and the shield come from, and the island of armor that I just caught the Slowpoke off of the island of armor that showed up at our train station. There's been just a lot of stuff that has really kind of fleshed out the world and like what the fact that there might be more going on than like me just going around and just collecting badges and that kind of thing like is really cool. Like it's really cool. And to that, like the Dynamax stuff that I had always heard was just kind of a bummer and felt like it didn't mean much is like literally why the game is called Sword and Shield. Like it's part of the whole, like it's part of the whole concept of they live in a region where this very specific thing can happen. They're studying it. They need you to go out and actually study it with them because it means that there's something weirder going on. It seems to be leading into the larger story with the corporation that runs this whole thing of like, hey, we created those Dynamax bands you're wearing, you know, and it's just like, oh great, like, and then now what else am I going to find out about this guy? There's just all of the ways that this is like working to build to this larger concept in a Pokemon game where, like, you know, like I said, the last time that I really sat down and played a Pokemon game, like the story was literally just like, go see the professor next door because he wants to give you a Pokemon. And it's like, okay, like, hey, and he's like, here, have this rabid animal that doesn't love you yet, but it might someday as long as you put it into enough fights. And it's like, what?
I mean, you're skipping some steps, but you're broad stroking it very well.
What is the deep lore of specifically the first Pokemon games? What is like the bigger story there?
Oh no, that's, you just want to be the very best, like no
yeah,
one ever was.
Right. Like
to catch them is your real test, but to train them, that's your cause.
Right.
It's Pokemon. You'll travel across the land searching far and wide. Each Pokemon to understand the power that's inside.
Okay. But you understand then why I was always more drawn than, especially narratively, to things like the show and the movies,
oh, yeah,
right?
Because that's where it all comes from.
Right,
The game does not have a deep narrative. I will say that. Like, the parts of it where they try to give it always kind of felt like Team Rocket is weird until, oh my God, like, you need to do this. And I'm like, why do I need to do this? Aren't I a 10-year-old? There are police officers, right?
There's been an Officer Jenny in every town I have walked into. Why is they not doing anything?
Yeah, I don't. That's cool. So I'm glad that you're enjoying it. I have not done a lot of gaming. I've been playing the e-reader levels for Super Mario Brothers 4 Advance.
Nice.
They're great because I had an e-reader. I was one of the 4 people who had an e-reader growing up. And so I played a bunch of them. But then to see like the depth that they went to eventually in the unreleased cards in America, I'm upset about it. But I am really happy. I just love that we have figured out as a society how to like corrupt ROMs to make sure that everything is in them, right? Woefully illegal, but I love it. I do absolutely love it. And I'm really looking forward to like Big Game Weekend 2023 coming up this week.
Nice.
With I'm excited to play Metroid Prime again. Because from my memory, it was the controls that were the thing that were the biggest hurdle for me to get past.
I mean, considering how beloved that game is, like, I don't want to call you out, but you are definitely in the minority on the feelings about that game. So, like, it would not surprise me if it was like just a glaring thing that just didn't click with you that clearly everybody else like was able to get past. Like, I'm not surprised if it was just the controls.
I mean, it's the fact that you had to switch between visors to aim and stuff, that's weird to me.
Yeah, no, I haven't touched a Pokemon game in 20 years because I felt like...
Yeah, but I felt attacked when you said it's this beloved game, Devon.
No, but to my point, Pokemon is a pretty huge fucking franchise that I have basically just written off for 20 years because of a bad experience I had with it, right? Like, so...
It
like,
does happen.
Right,
it does
that's
happen.
what we do, right?
Yeah. So I'm excited to give that one a chance again. Because... I do like Metroid. I obviously it's probably one of my favorite genres of game is the Metroid adventuring, finding the items to unlock.
Oh, you can
things.
say it, Dev.
Metroidvania? Is that what I can say?
Yeah, you can say the phrase. I heard you. I heard it get to the tip of your tongue, and you bit back on it, and you don't have to do that here.
Well, like I hadn't played Vania yet. Like I will admit, like it was Metroid that I enjoyed, so Metroid is what brought me to it. I don't know.
The phrase is not based on like Devon's feelings. You understand that, right?
Oh,
like,
I understand that. No,
Metroidvania is not because like specifically because Devon likes these two games. We're going to create this word.
Wait, it's not? You lie. Surely you jest. No. It's being honest. When I had played Metroid Prime, I liked the Metroid games.
Right.
I had beaten the Metroid 2 on Game Boy, which is like just a great game. It's just a fun game that I had beaten hundreds of times. So like when I played the new one and I'm like, oh, this is different from that. I mean, I've never really been a first person guy either. Like, you need to consider that too.
No,
So
yeah.
going into it, like, I had fun on Christmas, but then when I went back to school and then like, oh, do I want to play this when I get home? No, I don't think I do.
Yeah.
Sorry, Metroid. So I'm excited to do that one again. I'm also really excited that it's getting the physical release. I would be okay with that being the future that Nintendo takes, with the games available now, but you can purchase it physical a little bit later. Like a game with Metroid, I
Yeah,
can wait.
until we hit
Yeah.
a point where they're like, actually, due to the digital sales failing for this game, we're decided to not do a physical release going forward. It's just like great.
Right.
Because I don't know.
The game's still available though. Like, I understand where you're coming from. That is a dystopian
No,
outcome, but
but then the next step is we're going to stop period doing this. Like we're going to stop doing the re-release. Like that the what it is the physical release is going to be like a canary in the coal mine type situation. Is like they're going to see how much longer they can get away with this, and then if they can start slowly being like, okay, no more physical stuff, we're done with physical stuff. Like that's the thing. Is the pushing back of the physical release to me feels like an unnecessary step towards them trying to figure out if they even need to focus on physical media anymore. Like, just make the decision. Because, like, what is the point in a 2 week early digital release? Like, what is happening in that 2 weeks that we couldn't all just wait to play it's a weird decision to be like, this game is completely available to you now, but if you want to go out into a store and buy it, then hold your horses. Is like, okay. Like, why didn't then why not just release it all at once? Like, what is the point? The point is because they're trying to figure out if they can get away from physical material.
I mean, and then they hide it in, because then my thought is, no, but they wanted it to be a surprise. And it's like, yeah, but they could have done it that way, right? How many times were like, you had stock at Walmart for a thing and you're like, well, I know it. But like the way the internet is now, somebody would have taken a photo and it would have ruined their big moment in their direct.
Sure, yeah.
Like
If I thought for 2 seconds that the leaks of video games somehow was detrimental to the sale of video games, I would agree with you. But this is one of those things like pirating music that the industry will point to as a thing that's really hurting them. But actually, if you do the numbers, that pirated music is often the most like successful. Like a song is being pirated for a reason is essentially what all of the studies show. Same thing here is that you can say it's like, oh yeah, well if we released it early, then this would get out, and it's just like, yes, but that would only make the game sell better. You know that, right? Every time a game or a book or a movie has accidentally gotten onto a Walmart shelf 2 days before, it inevitably leads to that game getting a bunch of like hype and inevitably gets a bunch of people to buy it. Does that mean that critically they then love it? No. Very often nowadays it points to a large contingency of people who are just like, yeah, I went out of my way to get this early and it sucked. It's just like, thanks. You still
and then
pay
again,
for it,
there's
though.
a
Still get
phenomenon
that
there.
money.
There is a phenomenon there that you can't ignore, in the fact that if you get a game early, you might be playing it before the day one patch, and that changes the game.
They still got your money though.
They
That's
still got
the
my
point.
money. That's true. Yep.
That's the end game here, Dev. Is like you
Oof.
like they don't care. They don't care.
Yeah. Yeah. As much as I'm excited that like Nintendo, if it were just digital for the Metroid Prime Reloaded, Remastered, whatever it's called, I think it's just remastered. I don't know if I would buy it. I would wait for a sale. And even then, once it goes on sale, I don't know if I would purchase it. Knowing that there's a physical copy of it changes my mind there, right?
Yeah.
Changes my mind where like, well, it goes into the collection and it has different value there. But really what Nintendo is doing is essentially aping what limited run games is doing, in terms of, well, it's available now digitally, but if you give us money now, you'll eventually get a physical copy of it.
Yeah, I wonder, and I wonder how true that is, because we know that the reason that a place like Limited Run does that is because they are very open about trying to say, like, we need this much money in order to justify physical printing. So we need this kind of gauge to figure that shit out. And it's why sometimes you'll get a game 3 weeks later as a physical release, and sometimes you won't get a game until like 2 years later as a physical release.
I'm a little mad at limited run games right now. First, I'm done with them.
Yeah,
I will say that. Like,
but
the
they've
Garage
always
Band. No. Yeah.
they've always been very clear about that particular aspect
Oh,
of their marketing and their their product,
well,
right?
all I know is that I pre-ordered the River City Girls stuff on August 21st, 2021.
Hmm.
2 hours before Dale pre-ordered her stuff, Dale got her stuff this week. So everything that I pre-ordered exists. It's all available. It's in our house, but legally it belongs to Dale.
Yeah, and the thing is that the thing is that they play so close to the budget line on that on the physical stuff that is the risk that they take is they could end up pissing off a bunch of people by not doing it right, right? And that's why I'm wondering when you say that Nintendo is aping kind of the limited run style, I'm curious to see how close to that they are willing to get because limited runs pulling that kind of shit, like we can sit here and complain about it here on this podcast, but it's not going to change much, right? Nintendo pulling that kind of shit. Can you imagine the ways in which people out there would like start like their ears would perk up?
So here's the thing, right? 2 weeks, I'm willing to wait, right? I can deny. I've been looking forward to Kirby Return to Dreamland since it showed up on Amazon accidentally 8 months ago,
Right.
right? Like it's literally been sitting on like the pages on my web browser since it came up because I'm like, when it comes out, I'm gonna buy it because I've never played that one and I've heard really good things about it. And
Hmm.
after Forbidden Lands, like I'm in a Kirby mood, right? And by all accounts, the game is rebuilt with a new epilogue. So like I'm excited about it in a way that like maybe I'll be dashing my hopes and dreams come Friday when I finally own the game,
I wonder
right?
if they tie it into the Forgotten Lands in some way.
I don't know. I hope so. It'd be cool if they did, but also we'll see what happens, right? Well, next week I'm sure I'm going to report back on all of the gaming that I've done, right? So yeah, so it's Metroid Prime, it's Kirby Return to Dreamland, and then in the middle there, it's Grim Guardians Demon Slayers, which I'm super excited for. That's a Metroidvania for sure, and it's 2 player, so Dale and I are going to try to tackle it together.
Nice.
But yeah. So like I've been waiting 8 months for Return to Dreamland, right? 2 weeks I'm willing to wait for Metroid Prime. Any longer, if it were a game I cared about, there's a chance I would have bought the digital copy and then determined if I wanted the physical for the collection later on down the line,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Like it's one of those weird things because the limited run thing of it all, you buy the game digitally, that money goes directly to the publishers. All that money goes to the publishers. And then Limited Run steps in and says, why, yes, Shredder's Revenge, we would like to create a physical copy of it. We'll pay you the license rights to do that. But then pretty much all the profit from that physical stuff goes directly to them,
Right.
right? They're essentially saying, we're going to publish it, but we're self-publishing, right? We don't need any money from you. We just need your permission and to give you the money to be able to do that. And they've done some crazy stuff, but it's insane. It's insane the amount of time. I also pre-ordered a game last July. That's going to be here Tuesday. It's supposed to be here on Tuesday. That might be part of my big weekend of games too. I don't want to jinx it though. Like if it gets delayed or anything like that.
Right.
But like the fact that I ordered that almost a year after River City Girls and it's going to be here before my River City Girls, like it's just, it annoys me. Like what it comes down to is with Limited Run, they do their big like clearance sale in January every year. And like, that's how I got a physical copy of Infernax. So I have one of those to be like, this was my favorite game of 2022 and I can show it off. So like, what is the point of giving them the money up front, having that money taken from me, and then like sitting on my hands for multiple years waiting for the game to come? Like I don't, it's not something I want to take part in anymore. Right?
Yeah, no, I know. That's what I'm saying is like I'm curious to see how deep down this rabbit hole Nintendo is willing to go because I don't think you're wrong to call it out that it smells a lot like what you see with the limited run stuff. But like in that regard, the limited run stuff pisses a bunch of people off. They just get away with it because they are so niche and boutique in what they do that there isn't a big enough contingency of people to really kind of force their hand to be any different, right? Versus Nintendo is in a very different position in that regard. If they start pulling stuff like that, there's going to be a large swath of people at their door looking to burn the house down.
Yeah. And that's it. So that's something to keep an eye on. Because honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if we see another available digital now, physical in 4 weeks. Yeah. Even I watched the UK broadcast because the US version just wasn't playing for me on YouTube. So when I watched the direct, I watched the UK direct, and it said that the physical release wasn't going to be available in the UK until March 1st. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, I can wait 3 weeks. That's fine. And then I'm excited when I see that it's coming out February 22nd. So I'm like, oh, okay. And then, to boot, it's $40 in America for the physical copy. It is a $60 game. It's a 60-pound game.
Take that,
in the UK.
Redcoats.
Like, and people are still like, yeah, I'm excited to get it. And like, you should be excited to get it, but it's so observable. It's such a thing that can be observed so easily. It's not like the 90s where we didn't even know about like other games that were being released in Japan, right? Yeah. Unless we were looking for them. Yeah. Now, like, that's just, oh, okay. The same game that I'm going to be buying in America is $20 more. And even then, it's pounds, so it's more like $30 more.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just crazy. But I'm excited for my big game week. I don't know what I'm going to do. I think I'm also going to try to do Octopath Traveler before it gets pulled off a Game Pass. But who knows? My mileage may vary there. I also got the itch to finally complete Final Fantasy VI. So I got games I'm excited about. So there'll be more game talk to come in future episodes of the Say Report. That being said, is there anything else you want to talk about this week, Sejohn, or are you ready to send this one off to the vaults?
Let's send this one off.
All right, excellent. Thank you for joining us for the Say Report. If you have anything you'd like to bring to our attention, or you want to talk to Sejohn directly, make sure you find us on Twitter at the Say Report. Because Twitter's off of it. Because Twitter.
Yep.
Because Twitter's off of it. Because
Sejohn
just it nope. doesn't jive. No. Sejohn,
you know how hard it is to get banned on there now, but man, I did it.
Yeah, Sejohn is done with Twitter. Probably the right move, right? I do want to praise you in this moment because the fact that two-factor authentication is now locked behind the $8 a month Twitter Blue account, that's fucked up. That's what that is.
Well, it's especially because what is that? Does that mean that you can't sign in otherwise?
So you can sign in without two-factor authentication.
But
you can use something like Authy or something else still. But to use the one in-ground in Twitter, you can't do it.
But the reason that you have security on your shit is you say it's to protect your customers because that's good and looks good for the company, but you're also protecting your shit in that regard by essentially you have left a back door wide open and then turned the light on for everybody in that regard. Oh my God. Anyway. Yeah. So if you want to go steal Devon's identity, you can find him at Devon D.
Come for me. You don't want it. Actually, I love my identity. Please don't take my identity. Now as I nurse my fears, Will, please bring us home. Have a good one, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host, Devon Decker and Sejohn Sterwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.